Hello there. So I'm going to ask you to tell me your name and your rank and position on the ship at the time that you tested the hydrogen bomb.
Well, first of all, my name is Philip Severson, and I was raised in Nebraska and Iowa, and my family were farmers. The family tradition is that if you're physically able, we go into the service. But aside from that, there was a draft going on at the time, and I didn't want to be drafted because you didn't have any choice when they drafted you. So before I was 18, my dad signed me up so I could join the Navy, which I kind of wanted to do because I've been on dry land most of my life. I wanted to see some of the world. I had my 18th birthday while I was in boot camp, and then when I got done, they assigned us to a ship. My first assignment was on a ship called the USS Curtis AV-14. I was assigned to the boiler room down below in the ship, and that's where I started my apprenticeship in the service. And so I hadn't been aboard too long, and then they were getting ready. They said they were getting ready to go out to sea, and so we started loading provisions of all kinds on it. When we finally got fully at sea, they had an all hands meeting, and then they told us that we were going to Anahuac Island, which was in the South Pacific, about 100 miles from the equator, and also that we were on an operation to construct a hydrogen bomb. And all cameras were confiscated, and all mail was censored, and we were told not to tell anybody at home what we were doing. And so all this time while I was on that operation, they started visiting my folks to find out if I was writing home, about what I'd been, where I was at and what I was doing. So we arrived at Anahuac, and then they proceeded to build the tower, and we had the bomb itself on board too. And they brought a contingent of Marines on board who were quite happy that they weren't going to Korea. It seems like at that time that if you didn't go to Korea in combat and so on, they were doing a lot of atomic bomb experiments. They did a lot of them here in the Southwest, in New Mexico and in the White Sands, and they actually put some of those soldiers in trenches, and then they set the bomb off, and these guys were in the trenches and the blast rolled over them. And then they marched them through ground zero to kill the animals and put out the fires that the thing had started, because they wanted to see what the effects of radiation were. And of course they didn't know a lot about radiation then, and I don't think many of those men are with us today. So anyway, after they built the bomb, it took about 2 or 3 months, and we were in the lagoon just off the island where they were doing it. We picked up anchor and we steamed out about 30 miles away from the island where the bomb was at. And then we set out there maybe about a day or so, and then on the morning of the day of the explosion, they called us up I was down in the engine room, and they called a lot of us to come up and be there and watch it. And I was told to go report to the top deck, which was the very top of the ship. And the lifeboats were up there, and yeah, it was the highest point in the ship. And they explained to us that they were going to set off the bomb, and so they told us to turn our backs around and the way we were apparently they were faced, so they said, turn your back, turn around and brace yourself against something. And I was next to a lifeboat. And so went there and I braced myself, and I had both my arms over my eyes, leaning against this lifeboat, and then I had my feet braced too. So anyway, that they gave the countdown, and when they hit the zero, the first thing I noticed that happened was it was just before dawn, and everything lit up. It was just like the sun coming up, and it was hot, just like the sun. And it was light, and I'll swear to this day that I could see through my arms and see the boat that I was leaning on. And the heat wave came along with it and kind of took my breath away. Then the shock wave hit, and I'm not a weak man, and I was in good shape, and the shock wave buckled my knees. It was that strong. After that passed, they told us to turn around, and I turned around, and here was the whitest cloud I've ever seen. Just seemed to be growing and growing and growing to this. We didn't think it was going to quit. I might add that one of the things that they were worried about at the time was because the bomb was a hydrogen bomb, that there was a possibility it could be a chain reaction started. But fortunately that didn't happen. And I might add that the night before I was kind of worried about it, because I was fairly well read up on radiation and nuclear stuff. And the hours of the night when you're on watch, on the ship seemed to be much longer. I was thinking about home, and I was worried and afraid, and suddenly I remembered to pray. And while I was sitting there praying, in the space of 2 words, between the 2 words that I had just spoken, words came to my mind, and a hint of music with them. And then this poem all of a sudden was there, fully formed, and in my mind, and it stayed with me. It didn't leave, like a lot of things when you have a thought, why a thought will leave you, but this one didn't leave me. There's a weapon that is stronger than any gun or bomb. 'Tis more powerful than anything on earth. It's for us to use and share. It will banish all our care. It's that wonderful gift that's called a prayer. And that came to me as an inspiration that I have never before had, or never have had since. That was one of the important things that I remember of the whole event, was receiving this inspiration that has been with me all my life. So after the thing was over, we picked up everything, and they washed down the ship, because we had some radiation, and because I was on the top deck with no protection other than bracing myself against the boat, I got the first radiation effects and I didn't know that at the time, but I found out later. For security reasons, and that only the government knows, they said, you will not talk about this at all. You won't say anything to anybody and say anything about what you've seen or what you've done. And since after you got out of the service, after you finished your active duty, you were then put into the inactive reserves, which I was, which meant they still had control over you, even though you weren't in the service. You were still in inactive reserves, which meant that you could be called up if they needed you. And so they just said, no, you will not say anything at all, and that lasted for 20 years. And in the meantime, about 5 years after I was discharged, and I was back working in the construction industry, I began to feel weak, and I could eat like a horse and still lose weight. And at the time when I first got out, I was weighed about 200, close to, about 195 to 200 pounds. And then my thyroid apparently acted up, and and I went down to 167 pounds in probably less than a month. And my heart beat so hard I'd shake the bed, and I couldn't sleep on the bed, and scared my wife pretty bad because my heart was beating so hard and I was shaking the bed. So I had to sleep sitting up in a chair, in a lazy boy chair, so that my heart wouldn't beat so hard and I could go to get some sleep. And I lost all my strength, and I couldn't hardly do anything. So I went to the doctor, and he determined that I had a hyperactive thyroid. And so they gave me some radiation pills, just dinky little things, and they killed the thyroid, or they thought they did. And then I started getting better and gaining weight and feeling better. Now I'm on thyroid continually. I don't, because my thyroid has been destroyed.
And to clarify, you think that's directly related to your
I feel
experience?
it is, because no one in the family ever had thyroid problems at all. And then for years after the something had happened, and all of a sudden I'd have what I found out later was a flashback, and I could see the bomb all over again, and like I was there again. And I didn't realize till I talked to the guys from Vietnam that I was having flashbacks, where all of a sudden something triggers a memory, and you're right back there. And now it happens occasionally, but not nearly so much.
Do you think that your sensitivity to sunlight is also related?
Oh, of course. If you people that have thyroid problems, they first of all they start losing their pigmentation, like I did, and now I have to be careful in the sun. I don't wear short sleeves shorts, and I have to have, if I want to be out in the sun, in the real hot sun, for any length of time, I have to put sunscreen on, and if I don't, I get little tiny red spots, pinpoint red spots all over my skin. So that was the effect that I figure I got from the radiation. Surprisingly, in the area where I live, there were 5 of us. I got acquainted with a man who lived in Sioux City, and he had been in the islands at the same time. And then there was another man who was connected with the government, who was there as the observer too. So, and then there was also one man there who had been at the bikini operation. So there were 5 of us. And as far as I know, I'm the last survivor in my area. I don't know of anybody else. And the one from the Sioux City, he was on an island about 250 miles away. But the radiation has a funny thing, it skips over things, follows the pattern of the weather patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that they knew the bomb was going off, and it was pitch black, and they didn't think they'd ever see anything. And when it went off, it was daylight, and then he could see there were hundreds of guys that was on the island with him. Had all went down to the beach. He thought just him and his buddies went there, and so I said he eventually died of the fast-acting cancer that seems to come along with the people that get radiated. Well, I figured that I was pretty lucky. This was just normal operations. Things happen, you know, human error, and it could have developed worse and so on. But when you're young like I was, you're invincible.